Why do you think they news dumped it on Friday?
Well, I don't think the news cycle is necessarily what determined on when it went down. It was the final approval from the judge, who I don't think is thinking about what day or time of day she's doing these kind of things. I think it's just more of a coincidence than anything else, but it is for something that's so groundbreaking to have the ability to get kind of lost in the weekend, which it obviously didn't, is kind of funny.
I think, and I agree with you, I don't think the judge was going, well, I don't think they went to the judge and said, or the NCAA said, can you do us a favor and make this ruling by maybe, I don't know, Friday at some point, middle of the day maybe? Later in the day, evening, whatever you can do. But I also think the NCAA, look, they know, even if you throw this thing on a Friday news dump, it doesn't go away. They know that. But I will say this. It does give them a couple of days, even if it was by coincidence, to try to get their act together so they don't sound like the typical bumbling, stumbling fools that they really are, correct? They at least get a couple of days to try to come up with some kind of uniformed stand, so to speak, right? That they can just start throwing it out there and not do what they typically do, which is trip over their feet and fall down the stairs.
You would think that didn't really end up being the case.
No, it did not. It did not. Well, before we get to that real quick, there's a lot of talk this could really conceivably end the NCAA as any type of entity that matters in the stuff that we care about, mostly college football, and probably at some point they'll lose their grip on the men's college basketball tournament as well before it's all said and done. Who knows?
Yeah.
Is the NCAA dead?
Effectively, yes. I think at this point, the only real power they have is over eligibility, which, again, we're still kind of tied up in their sole phase-on thing for this upcoming year. But even that, as we've seen through lawsuits, which, again, is the route that Russell Faison's going, they only have so much power with that as well. Now, could there end up being an entity or maybe the College Sports Commission taking that over down the line? Certainly so. But I think, Paul Feinbaum was on SportsCenter the other day talking about the House settlement, and he said at this point they're just tournament organizers, which, I mean, again, the only championship that doesn't run through them is the college football playoff, so they still have a reason to exist as of right now, but as time goes on and more things change, that might not be the case in 4 to 5 years. I
just feel like, first of all, they can't institute any punishment for anything. We've seen that. The eligibility thing, you nailed it. I mean, they lose in court all the time. They'll continue to lose in court all the time. They really are, and I really believe at some point, once this commission and the power leagues finish up whatever they need to do or what they think they need to do to get this thing in the right direction temporarily until they get sued, which then everything goes to hell again. I think at some point they turn their eyeballs toward the NCAA basketball tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And they will all huddle up, because one thing these conferences are good at is making money, right?
Of course.
What makes billions of dollars?
The NCAA
tournament.
Yeah.
The men's tournament. So the NCAA, enjoy it right now. Just saying, enjoy that money right now. Now, circle back to, I think, what is interesting, and again, break out your shot glass. Obviously, until this stuff gets collectively bargained, which it has to at some point, we'll continue down this road that we do. And the first thing we'll get hit is the NIL. You made a great point. You probably said this on the air after you and I talked about it last week. The thing you said about the $600 threshold,
mm-hmm.
that what these creative NILs can do is just give a kid like $599 NIL deals to get around the $600 threshold, because if it's not $600, it doesn't go through the clearinghouse. So you can find a creative way to maybe, instead of the kid getting a big $2 million NIL deal, he'll just get a lot of $599 NIL deals.
Yeah.
Hey, someone could try that, Tyler.
They probably will, or they just won't report it. And that's the thing
mm-hmm.
here is this College Sports Commission is supposed to, oversee this. The NIL Go clearinghouse is supposed to approve or deny NIL deals. What if I just don't report it? What if I get $1 million from some collective to go play for their school. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not going to report it. Are you watching? Is the CSC going to watch my bank account to see those transactions being made, saying, hey, wait a minute, where's this coming from? Like, I don't think they have that level of access and security to do those kind of things. So what if people just don't report it? And what are, if you tell me that my deal has been denied, that I can't go through with this, for one, I'm going to sue you. And two, what's going to happen? What's your punishment? What if I take that check? What if I still get that money? What are you going to do to me? What are you going to do to my school that's not going to get you in court?
But Tyler, that would be cheating. Nobody cheats. Come on, what's up with you? But you make a great point. Here's the thing, and then we always go back to pour your shot glass. You need to collectively bargain because you hit it. If once this clearinghouse thing stops a kid from getting $1 million NIL deal, he is going to take them to court, and they are going to lose. Because what are they doing again, my man?
Violating antitrust. We talked with Christy Dosh yesterday, and she did make an important note that this, clearinghouse did change their wording from fair market value to reasonable range of compensation, which again is still wide open because, again, how can you tell me what a quarterback or a wide receiver or an edge or a kicker is even worth in this wide open market that has no standards?
Okay, so let's go to that premise. Once again, get your shot glass out. All right, so there is how do we stop in the NFL? We'll just use the NFL. In the NFL, how do we make sure that when we use salary for the word, because we don't have a better word to use than salary, how do we make the salaries go down a certain lane without going crazy and out of control?
Because there's a cap agreed upon by the collective bargaining agreement.
Exactly. There is something agreed upon. Major League Baseball doesn't have a cap, which they should, or a salary floor, which they should, but they have a thing called a luxury tax.
Yep.
Now, is that as good as a salary cap? No. They'll try to say it is, but their nose grows and goes out the window because they're lying. But Major League Baseball even has something called a luxury tax threshold. The NBA has a salary cap and a salary apron. So all these leagues have processes in place to stop the wild, wild west. One way to stop it in college athletics, Tyler.
I don't even want to say it. I think we all know the answer. But again, it's gotten to this point where now, and I think about it like this: if I'm Texas, if I'm the SEC or the Big Ten, I don't want to collectively bargain because I know my schools are more inept to have more money than the others, to where we can have a competitive advantage by spending more than everybody else. I don't want to have to go down to the level of Purdue and Baylor and these other schools that otherwise wouldn't be able to compete with me.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why, to me, college athletics is just like Major League Baseball. Why don't you have a salary cap and a salary floor in Major League Baseball? The Players Association, A, doesn't want it, but B, more importantly, the big market teams don't want it. Because the big market teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers have a financial advantage over every team in baseball pretty much. Does it mean they win the World Series every year? No. But it gives them the financial power to be able to spend more money than everybody else to put themselves in position to be competitive every year. That's what teams in the Big Ten and the SEC have. And it's not every team in the Big Ten and the SEC, by the way. It's what do you think? I believe combined, what would you say, and I'm going to be maybe a little bit, 15 teams, 20 tops in those two leagues combined truly have the power to be competitive every year. Maybe even less, right?
Yeah, I think that might be generous. But, yeah, definitely no more than 15 to 20 that can set themselves apart based on the resources that they have.
So really, and it is, there are, we've been saying this forever, there are folks in college athletics who love the Wild Wild West.
Of course.
Because the Wild Wild West gives them an advantage. Look at Texas Tech, for the love of God. Look at BYU. All of a sudden BYU went, we're the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We have billions of dollars. How about we start giving it to BYU so they can start, recruiting the best players to beat the snot out of everybody? Texas Tech has that bazillionaire alum who his job before he dies is to make Texas Tech matter.
Yep.
But all that will go away if this thing ever became a collective bargain level playing field.
Yeah. No.
They don't want to do that, dude.
You're not wrong. Not wrong at all. We'll keep this conversation going, touch on some more things as the 12 o'clock hour rolls on. Ty Reds, Harry Ford, and Cap and Dave with you on the halftime show on your Tuesday on the game. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Terry Ford, Cap and Dave on your Tuesday here on the game as we navigate our way through the long off season. We are 82 days away from South Carolina and Virginia Tech squaring off in Atlanta to start the 2025 season, and we are, of course, in the season of lists. And a couple of articles on On3, this one by Dan Morrison, kind of arranging all the teams based on ESPN's S&P Plus that came out the other week and what exactly the SEC standings would look like. And, you know, you have your usual suspects towards the top of this thing: Texas, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, a little bit further down on the list. And, again, this is based on the S&P Plus, so it's not somebody's prediction of what the final results are going to look like. But 9th out of 16, which would obviously be less than ideal because last time I checked, Terry, I don't think anybody's getting 9 teams into the college football playoff. That is actually physically impossible with the current structure that we have as of right now.
Yeah, it's not going to happen, bud. Not going to happen. And they have the over. Basically, they have South Carolina looking at a 7.3 or whatever it is, the win probability. So it's like almost 7.5, correct?
Yeah, basically.
Somewhere in that nature. All right. So if we go the over/under on that, where are you going over? Are you going over that 7.5 or under that 7.5? What do you think?
I will give the benefit of the doubt and go over. There's still a lot of questions I have, though. So yeah, I'm saying that without a ton of confidence right now.
You weren't really you didn't sound like you were ready to pump your chest on that. You really weren't.
No.
So you have 7.5 for South Carolina. I'm gonna go over as well. I think, look, 8-9 wins I think is obviously doable. Maybe even more if everything plays itself out. But I think if I have to go over/under, I would go over the total. Auburn's right there with South Carolina, roughly 7.5. Would you go over/under Auburn?
I'm probably going to go under. I just haven't seen enough out of Hugh Freeze. And now, what are we going into year number 3, 4, however long he's been back there? 3, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's 3.
I just haven't seen enough out of him, man. I don't have a lot of confidence.
I'm with you. I think under with Auburn because I'm like you as well. I will when I believe it, I see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
When I believe it, I see it. All right. The team right above both of them is LSU at basically 8. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's me. Maybe I think Brian Kelly's a better head coach than he really is, or maybe I think that a lot of people think he's an odd fit for the SEC. And maybe he is. I don't know. I just think LSU is going to be better than an 8-win team. Maybe I'm nuts. I don't know.
Look, with the resources that you have there, and again, Kelly is a very good coach, you should never dip below 8 wins. So I think just by the standard alone, you should be at least at 8. And if he has anything less than that, then we might start having to have a difficult conversation about Baton Rouge.
Oh, if they didn't get over 8 wins, there's a good chance Brian Kelly's the ex-head coach in Baton Rouge. That's not. They might give you 1 year of that, but remember, it feels like even though this guy's averaging 10 wins a year,
yeah,
it feels like he's underachieving. Is that weird?
Yeah, it feels like you're getting worse by the year. And again, he set the bar so high by winning the West in year number 1. And then again, you have the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback and this electric offense, but a defense that was anemic essentially. In 2023. So it just feels like they've gotten worse every single year. Now, their worse, their bad is still better than a lot of programs out there. But again, the standard will not allow Brian Kelly to continue to slip year after year. And if they only won 8 games this upcoming season, that would be a step back from 9 wins this past year.
All right, so if you continue to look at the over/under, I think this is interesting. Texas A&M's at 8. That's what Texas A&M does, right? 7, 8?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that pretty much who they are?
They will. Again, they were a top 10 team when they came in here a season ago, and they still managed to be right around, what were they, 8-4 last year when it was all said and done. So that just kind of seems like the gold standard of what A&M football, at least since they've been in the SEC, is.
It doesn't matter how much money they spend. It doesn't matter who they hire. They're the 8-win Aggies.
Pretty much.
Because they are, man. Now, this is, to me, this year at Ole Miss is interesting. Lane Kiffin, well, let's be honest. Look, everybody digs Lane. He's snarky. He can say he's really funnier on social media than he is in real life. But we've all kind of turned, and we're all pro Lane now, right? Let's be real. They underachieved last year. They flat out underachieved last year. I don't care what they did in their stupid bowl game. It doesn't matter. That was a team built for the college football playoff. They should have never lost to Florida, should have never lost to Kentucky. There were games they lost that they would have won if they would have played in the field. So to me, it was underachieving, right?
You're telling me that
Correct?
beating half of Duke's roster in the Gator Bowl wasn't impressive?
Well, he thought it was. I was ready for him to hold his own parade after the game. Remember all that? We wanted to show you. What did you show us? I mean, come on. Duke had a bunch of guys from like the science department playing in that game. Come on, man. You showed us nothing, Lane. So this year is going to be another little petri dish for me because the expectation's nowhere near what it was last year, right?
Right.
It just isn't. You're starting the kid Simmons at quarterback, and you didn't go out there and become a portal king or anything this year like you did in the previous couple seasons. Right now, their over-under is 8. I think they go over, and here's why. I think right now, and it could change, I believe Lane Kiffin is better when he's going under the radar. I think he's better as an underdog, more comfortable as the underdog. Last year, he wasn't. Last year, he was a favorite, right? A big dog.
Yep.
They didn't handle it very well. I think this year, back under the radar, Ole Miss wins over 8.
We'll see. Again, they're expected to have maybe not quite as talented of a roster as they had a year ago, but a pretty darn talented one, and we obviously know what they are spending to do that. So yeah, they should not be flirting with only 8 wins, just given the talent that they have.
You know what I think is interesting? Tennessee's at almost 9, 8.7. With all the stuff going on, really with the quarterback, to be honest, that's what the whole thing was, right?
Yeah.
With the quarterback.
Yeah, that's one of those things that, and even talking to one of the Tennessee insiders a couple weeks ago, when you were out, was there's not a lot of confidence right there in the offense right now. And when you don't know, because again, there's no guarantee that Aguilar's going to be the guy for week 1. They're still battling that out technically. So until you figure that out and can see some production out of it, I'm pretty weary when it comes to Tennessee. Now, again, they got guys turning on defense, which is always good, but you need offense to keep up in this league.
And, the almost 9 is the thing. I think no matter what happens to Tennessee this year, they're an 8-win team. But if one of these quarterbacks can navigate, look, that offense is so quarterback friendly. We forget that because of Nico struggles and Milton struggles. But look, Nico was a newbie.
Sure.
And Milton, look, we've talked enough about Joe Milton's limitations, right?
Yeah.
I think if you put a cerebral quarterback in there who can just point guard that offense like Hendon Hooker was, I think that's all you need. You don't need some dude like Joe Milton who can throw the ball through a brick wall or whatever. You just need a guy that can drop back, get the quick read, get the ball out fast to the playmakers, and let them go do things. If one of these quarterbacks can do that, Tennessee can have a really good year. But 9 might be a little bit too much right now because we just don't know enough. You got Bama's almost at 9.5, Georgia's at 10, Texas at 10.
Mm-hmm.
You buy the over on all 3 of those?
Man, I'm still weary about Alabama.
I won't disagree with you. I mean, again, Ty Simpson looks like the front runner at quarterback. I mean, he's a guy, again, 5-star kid, but he had every chance to win that job from Jalen Milroe, and he couldn't do it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So what makes me think, and look, it might be again, everybody progresses differently, right?
Yeah.
So maybe this kid just needs a little bit more, maybe you need to stay in the oven a little bit more seasoning. When you got a little turkey thermometer thing that pops?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Maybe it wasn't ready to pop a couple years ago. Maybe it's ready to pop now, Tyler. Maybe Ty Simpson will be fantastic running the offense. Kalen DeBoer's got his OC back. I don't know. We'll see.
And I think just by default, with the talent that you have on that roster, you should be around 8.5 to 9 wins just in general anyway. It's can you step to that next level is where I'm still not sure about the DeBoer era at Alabama yet. Okay,
ready? What if you only, it's so funny because we say this about Alabama, what if you only win 9 games and miss the playoffs in year 2 if you're Kalen DeBoer?
They might be looking for a new head coach for 2027 or 2026.
You think about that for a minute. You win 9 again, but you miss the playoffs 2 straight years, and you could conceivably be looking for a new gig.
Yeah, hey, that's the standard.
Uh-huh.
You know
That's what happens when you
listen,
follow a Saban, right?
You know what you signed up for, Caitlin. Like, don't be surprised.
Absolutely. And I'm with you. Look, Georgia's Georgia at this point with Kirby. They'll make it work. And look, I've already given my heartfelt apologies to Steve Sarkisian that I didn't think he could do this at Texas. And I'm down with 10 wins for both of those spots.
Yeah, I think for sure. We'll hit in case you just woke up. Coming up next as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Ed, Terry Ford, Captain Dave on your Tuesday on the Game.
1, 2 outs, the 2-2. Ground ball to first. Ball game. Murray State has done it. Upset in Durham. The Racers race on to Omaha.
Welcome back in, halftime show. Tyler Ed, Terry Ford, Captain Dave. It is time for In Case You Just Woke Up. That was called last night on ESPN as Murray State holds on in a crazy little back-and-forth game there with Duke to punch their ticket to be the 8th team into the College World Series. It gets rolling later on this week out in Omaha. Terry, I want to give Murray State a lot of credit, one, for getting to this point, but two, I don't know if you saw this, they thought they had the game won on a interference call in the 9th inning. They went back and reviewed it, determined it was not interference. They had to get off the dog pile, had to put their uniforms back on, and still go out there and get the final out. So they had to win that game twice last night.
Yeah, and look, the thing about it is it's such a cool story. I saw something on social media where the head coach is also mows the lawn at the field.
Yeah, and they have like a field that they say fits 800 people. I'm going to call BS on that one because it definitely doesn't look that way, but they basically play on what looks like a decent softball field that you and your buddies play on.
Right. It's such a cool story that they get to the College World Series. And it's so funny, especially now, because we're looking at, and when we say this, and it might be true, it might not. In this new world order that's coming, the have-nots are going to be more have-not, right?
Sure.
That's just where we think is going to happen. So enjoy all these heartwarming stories because who knows how many we get moving forward down the road. But this is a great story with Murray State. Look, Duke hasn't been to the College World Series since 1961, so it's not like is there some blue blood in baseball, right?
Right.
But what Murray State did is fantastic. And it's interesting because in this College World Series, you still have Coastal Carolina, you still have a Murray State. Oregon State's not is not a Power 4 conference school, and they've always been a good baseball program, at least for a long time. Now they might not be moving forward down the road, but I mean they're not in a Power 4 league. So you got 3 teams that don't have any affiliation to the big dogs who made it to Omaha. The SEC, they get 300 teams in the NCAA tournament.
They set a record with 13, and only 2 of them are playing in Omaha.
Right. You obviously have LSU and Arkansas. And then you have the ACC represented by Louisville. You have the Big 12 represented by Arizona. And who am I missing? I got 7. I'm missing 1.
Let's see. Arizona, Coastal, Louisville, Oregon State, UCLA, LSU.
UCLA from the Big 10. So you got all 4 power leagues represented by, I believe, Big 12, Big 10.
Yeah, you got all 4 power leagues.
You got all 4. You got 5 teams there, and you got your 3 outside the power leagues. So it's a nice little mix. You would be stunned if Murray State or maybe even Coastal or Oregon State won. Oregon State probably has the best chance out of the 3, but still it's fun to have a little mix of teams where it's not all just blue blood behemoths. By the way, I saw an interesting stat. I think it was 80%. I think it was 80% of all pitches. Speaking of Arkansas, 80%, I think it was, of all pitches thrown 98 miles an hour or harder in college baseball were thrown by either Tennessee or Arkansas's pitching staffs.
I did see that stat as well, which is mind-boggling. But when you look at how good those programs are, and obviously they had to square off against each other to determine who's going to be going to Omaha, that checks out. And Arkansas is looked at by a lot of people as the favorite of the teams remaining for potentially keeping the streak alive for the SEC winning the national championship.
And isn't it interesting how this thing, and this is, I guess, if you're a South Carolina baseball fan, I'm not saying this gives you 100% hope, but you do have the hope of seeing, we've seen a lot of quick turnaround action in the SEC, right?
Right.
Arkansas, it felt like not Arkansas was underachieving, but Arkansas was kind of almost, they couldn't score runs. They had really good pitching the last couple of years. They just couldn't, offensively, there was no consistency. So Dave Van Horn and the crew said, okay, let's go get some hitters. They brought thumpers in this year, right?
Yep.
And they've been a phenomenal offensive team, and they still have really good pitching. We've seen these extreme turnarounds, by Auburn, and we saw what Georgia's done. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, you see the roadmap of teams that have flipped this thing upside down to get better.
Sure.
Will South Carolina do it? I'm not saying they will, but we do see how you can, from year to year, change your luck.
It gives you hope, right? And Jack and I talked about this earlier. You know, Paul Maneri, again, based on what he said in media availabilities and what we learned from Whittle's piece, did not like the talent level he had on his team. So, okay, a lot of your guys have left. You've gotten tons of space to fill in the transfer portal, and they've been doing that for the past week or so since the portal's been open. So it's going according to plan. Now go out there and execute and get yourself back into a situation where you can be in contention for something like this next year, and people will get off your back. But I think a lot of people are still in the I'll believe it when I see it type of camp.
Sure, and especially when we read some of the behind-the-scenes things, your concern is, can you turn it around?
Yes.
Right? I mean, there's things here that and we've talked about it ad nauseum since John Whittle's piece came out, but there are some things that you legitimately, I think, should be concerned about when you go, can they get an extreme turnaround? Oh, they could, but, right?
Can they figure out how to use the resources that are already there that everybody else is using that they have no reason not to use?
Does anybody know how to turn on the TrackMan?
Yeah, you know what? Maybe that's the problem is they don't know where the on button is. They're like, we're all right. We don't need that thing.
It's like when you call customer service, sir, do you have the computer plugged in?
Well, I do now, and it's working. Thanks.
Or have you turned on your computer, sir?
And you know what? When they ask you that and you realize you haven't done that, don't you almost get kind of angry? And like, how dare you think I haven't plugged it in when you haven't?
And then you got to make a big deal. Then you got to find a way to get off the phone real quick, right?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. No, it's working now. You fixed it. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
You know what? At that point, you better take the little survey afterwards and say they did a good job.
Yeah, a phenomenal job. And look, most of us, unless you have a dog in the fight in Omaha, pretty much all of us are going to be cheering for Murray State. We just are,
I think
right?
a lot of people here. I think a lot of people here cheer for Coastal too, because they're local.
Yeah.
But yeah, the and I want to be careful to say this because Coach Schnall said, hey, they're not Cinderellas. The teams that are perceived as underdogs in this, in Coastal and Murray State, I think are going to garner a lot of attention for fans of teams that didn't make it, right?
Yep. Here are the odds. By the way, I'm looking at the odds. We talk about Coastal. Arkansas is the favorite, followed by LSU. Coastal is number 3 at plus 600. But here's the drop from Arkansas is plus 195, LSU is plus 240. Then you drop down to Coastal at 600, plus 600, Oregon State plus 650. So it's far and away clear that the people that set the odds think Arkansas and LSU are prohibitive favorites of one of those two to dogpile.
Well, the more important question is who's going to be able to take home the Jello Shot Championship at, Rocco's out there, now that you have a couple of teams that haven't been there before or been there in a while?
Right. Yes. And by the way, real quick before we move on from baseball, Duke loses to Murray State.
Yep.
Now, a name that we brought up a couple of years ago when South Carolina was looking for a head coach was Chris Pollard at Duke.
Mm-hmm.
What Chris Pollard has done at Duke with very little help, backing, resources, or passion for what he's doing from the athletic program is phenomenal. And we figure at some point someone with resources and a baseball pedigree and a baseball lineage was going to hire Chris Pollard, right?
Yep.
Well, Virginia did.
Yes, they did. And they seem to be investing a lot of resources into baseball to try and get their program turned around.
And losing Brian O'Connor, who is one of the best coaches in the country, to Mississippi State. Losing that guy, but then pivoting and stealing from an ACC rival, another guy who is well-respected and revered.
Yep. Well,
good work by Virginia.
And look, they're a program that's used to being in Omaha. Again, 3 out of the past 4 years they've been into the College World Series. And again, they're not a program that expects to lose a coach like they did. So go out there and hire somebody that's just as good, if not better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Duke loses Chris Pollard, and he moves on to Virginia, where he'll take over for Brian O'Connor, who's now at Mississippi State. And O'Connor, again, gets more resources in Starkville, where last time I checked, they kind of really dig baseball.
That's very, very true. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour, hit our Firehouse Subs text the hour, 803-404-6100 as the halftime show rolls along on your Tuesday on the Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler, Terry, and Captain Dave. Wrapping up hour number one. It is time for our Firehouse Subs text of the hour at 803-404-6100. Nameless texter. Apparently, I got too far ahead of myself a moment ago, Terry, where I said I think people locally might be rooting for Coastal. Nameless texter says, Coastal equals USC Conway. That would tie us in natties in our best sport. Blank that.
Oh.
So maybe not everybody's rooting for the Chanticleers.
Maybe not everybody. Oops. Didn't think about it that way.
But, I do. That's actually a really good point that he brings up, because there's already a lot of pressure on Maneri going into year number 2. But if the smaller school in the state with probably not even half the resources that you have were to go out there, and they've already made it back to Omaha, that's checking a box enough. But if they were to go out there and win another national championship and tie you since you've gone back-to-back over a decade ago, whew, that's a further bad reflection on the South Carolina baseball program.
Yes, and especially where you're at today. It's not like, you were in the NCAAs this year. You were at a regional and you got beat. But no, you had the worst season in program history. And so if Coastal would go on to win the whole thing, and now they've got 2 and you've got 2, and right now they'd be looked at as a better program than you, which makes it even worse. I
mean, we're being honest. In the past 10 years, in a way, they kind of have been the better program, right?
I mean, they've had a lot of success. And so at the end of the day, yeah, and that puts even more of a spotlight on where you're at. So if you would have said in 2000, even go 2011, that we would be having this conversation today,
nobody would have believed you.
Yeah, they say, how many beers have you had, Chief? Yeah, no way. So, yes, this just goes back to the idea of, first of all, you give Coastal a ton of props, what they've done there over the years. And 2, you've got to step back and look at where you're at in South Carolina. And that's why I always say this, man. Never take for granted when your team is really good.
Nope, absolutely not. I tell people that all the time when it comes to this women's basketball program. We're in the midst of it right now, which is great. There does come a point, at some point, maybe it's when Dawn Staley retires, I don't know, but at some point you stop winning national championships, and then, you reset the standard. For right now, enjoy it, because you're in the midst of the good time.
Yeah, and because, look, right now, let's just be honest. There is a part of the fan base. Well, there's a part. I don't know how big a part it is, but there's a part of the fan base that goes, like, if South Carolina rolls through the SEC undefeated, they go like this. Oh, yeah, that's great, whatever. Wake me when they get to the Final Four.
Pretty much.
I mean, think about that for a minute. You're so dominant, part of your fan base goes, yeah, whatever. I'm bored with how good you are.
Yeah.
Let me know when you get to the Final Four.
Yeah, concern comes up when you're not beating an opponent by 30 points.
Yeah. Or, God forbid, you lose a game somewhere in the middle of the season.
Yep.
Then it's like, what? Now, there will, I think, because of what happened at the end of last year in the national championship game when, UConn boat raced you, and then you also got beat badly by them at home, there is, I guess you get a renewed interest from some of those folks in the fan base who have been taking for granted. Now there's something to be more compelled by, right?
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. And I say this all the time. Don't ever take for granted when your team is really good.
Nope.
Because you never know when they're not going to be really good. And there's no guarantee they're always going to be really good. They're just not.
So, not everybody rooting for the Chanticleers in Omaha, apparently. So, I don't know. Maybe you can jump on the Murray State bandwagon, texter, and root for the Racers, I guess. But
I mean, to me, that's where the fun is, man. Murray State's going to be fun.
Terry, hopefully the repair goes well, and hopefully we see you in here tomorrow.
Oh, it's the thermostat.
Okay. Well, that's not bad, I guess. Hour number 2 on the way. Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Just Tyler Head along with you now for the next little bit here. Going to re-rack the conversation that Elijah Campbell and I had with Brad Kellner of Texas Sports Unfiltered yesterday afternoon in the 2 o'clock hour, coming up here at 1:15. They're going to be talking with Michael Felder, our resident college football expert on all the happenings in the world around college football, particularly when it comes to the latest with UNC and Bill Belichick and all those kind of things as well. That's coming up at the bottom of the hour as we roll on. Again, Terry was supposed to be here today, but texted me last night at like 11:30 telling me like, hey, my car is smoking and it's overheating, so I need to go get this checked out. Reasonable, and hopefully we can get him back in here coming up tomorrow and get things back to normal around here. But we're making it through. We're doing fine, and we'll make it work for sure for today. Of course, 82 days away from kickoff. We're in the midst of what we like to call as the season of list, where you have rankings and projections and top 10 this, top 25 that, and all these kind of things coming out leading up to the start of the season. One thing I want to focus on here that's come out in the past couple of days is Greg McElroy of course, ESPN, our sister station, Jocks FM, has his podcast, Always College Football, and he recently made his top 10 list of defenses heading into the 2025 season. Some usual suspects at the top: Texas, Georgia, Alabama, A&M, teams like that. You expect Tennessee, Ohio State. Sorry, I was looking for a different list there. Tennessee, Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, teams like that at the very top of the list when it comes to his top 10 defenses. One team that did not make the list was South Carolina. And cut number one here, Dave. Greg McElroy explains, did put them on the list as an honorable mention. Greg McElroy explains his reasoning for leaving South Carolina outside the top 10.
I have in my honorable mention category is probably going to create a bit of a stir. I acknowledge this. Doesn't mean that they can't be great. I just don't know how they're going to be able to replace the amount of senior production that was lost off last year's team and at South Carolina.
So, and he's right on that, by the way. And for reference, outside of his top 10, he has honorable mentions of Indiana, Ole Miss, Iowa, Nebraska, South Carolina, and Tennessee. So if you want to get very specific, technically speaking, I guess it's a list of 16 teams that he feels like are towards the top of college football. So I guess you consider South Carolina in the top 16 if you want to be specific when it comes to his list. But he's very right. A reason for leaving them off this list, which I don't disagree with at all, given all that South Carolina's lost, is the lack of senior production that you had. And let's just look at the first couple levels of the defense from a season ago, where you looked at the interior of the defensive line. You had Boogie. You had Tonka. You had DeAndre Jules, who had played a lot of college football, right there anchoring the middle of that defense. You had a guy in Monkel Goodwine on the team a year ago, as well as Nick Barrett, though they didn't play quite as much compared to some of those other guys that are, for the most part, now gone. Now you have Barrett and Goodwine kind of as the leaders in that room as of right now. Xavier Hardy, somebody that is expected to come in and make an impact out of the JUCO ranks. Gabriel Brownlow Dinley, who, of course, was a highly touted guy coming out of high school and going to A&M, as well as Troy Pikes. But again, the total amount of production that you had pales in comparison to where you were at a year ago. And then you look at the second level of things when it comes to, and then you add in Kyle Kennard there coming off the edge too, who hadn't wowed necessarily as much as we expected, hadn't wowed as much as he did a season ago prior to being at South Carolina, but he's somebody that had played a lot of snaps from his time at Georgia Tech before coming over here. Then you go to the middle of the defense, and this was the most senior-laden group out of all of them in terms of what the expectations were and how many snaps they had played. When you talk about linebacker, Debo Williams, Bam Martin-Scott, and Demetrius Knight. Like, those three guys in the middle of your defense had 8 billion snaps and 47 years of experience combined together. At least that's, what it felt like. And having them anchor the middle of your defense, you had Demetrius Knight being the green dot guy, calling the shots and communicating the signals and all that kind of stuff. And when you have good experience in the middle of your defense, I think it goes a long way and resonates with everybody else on your defense as well, because they're falling in line behind that leadership that you have. You don't have that this year. You have some experience back there when it comes to guys like, Jaron Willis and things like that. But expecting them to play at that same level, at least right out of the gate, is going to be tough. Now, you have a J.R. Johnson going into his second year at Carolina, Sean Murphy and Justin Okoronkwo, two highly touted guys coming out of high school that don't have a ton of snaps that you are hoping can develop and become those type of players, but you don't know that yet. You don't know that yet, for sure. On the back end of the defense, you had O'Donnell Fortune, right, playing one of the cornerback spots. You had Nicky Minori, who was a true junior last year with a lot of experience there as well. And now, you've got experience returning in Jalen Kilgore. Brandon Cisse is somebody that didn't have experience here but does have a lot of snaps in his college football career. Judge Collier has played a decent amount. But when you look at the entirety of it as a whole, you don't have quite what you had a year ago. I'm not saying this defense can't be as good, if not better, but you felt like you knew more about it going into the 2024 season compared to 2025. And again, last year's defense, while, maybe didn't quite live up to the exact historic standards that were set prior to the season beginning, still ended up being pretty darn good, and was the reason why South Carolina was able to win, the 9 games that they did in a lot of sense. But this is where, and again, I think it's generous that Greg McElroy is even including South Carolina as honorable mentions, given what they have lost, because it seems like he has a lot of faith in what Coach Beamer and his staff underneath him are going to be able to do with this defense in the offseason to get them where they need to be. And that starts with Clayton White, the defensive coordinator. Cut number 2 here, Dave. This is Greg McElroy talking about Clayton White when it came to South Carolina being excluded from his top 10 list.
Clayton White, their defensive coordinator, has done an amazing job. I think he does such a solid job of making sure that his defensive backs are extremely physical, his safeties are really versatile, and he allows those defensive linemen to pin their ears back and get after the opposing quarterback. He's been there for 5 years. He understands exactly where he is. He's constantly in the running for the Broyles Award, and rightfully so. The guy.
By the way, a coordinator being at one place for 5 years is such a rarity in today's world of college football because of how much movement goes along, guys being hired and fired, guys taking new jobs and all those kind of things. But Clayton White has been a mainstay, the mainstay when it comes to coordinators. Now that, you've now in your third different offensive coordinator, at least ones that have called plays here at South Carolina, since Shane Beamer first got here. But Clayton White has been the consistent thing on defense. And again, you had a bit of a dip a couple years ago in 2023, but he worked himself back into the good graces for people last year to the point where late in the season we were wondering, like, man, is this guy going to get hired away and get another job somewhere? We're having to look for a new defensive coordinator. Thankfully, that didn't happen, and he's back for another season. But this is where he really earns his money, right? It's like, okay, Clayton, your defense was great a season ago. You put a ton of guys in the NFL. That's all fine and good. Now you're resetting. Now you're back to square one again with a lot of guys with inexperience. So how do you get the most out of them? How do you and your assistants under you on the defensive side of the football develop these guys to the point where they're playing at an even higher level and getting better? And again, taking some of these younger guys, some of these even freshmen maybe that could find their way onto the field this year, and developing them to the point where they can play at the level asked of them here at South Carolina in the SEC, and taking these guys coming in from the transfer portal and getting them ingrained in your system and ingrained in your style of defense to where, once again, you can get the most out of them and you can be very productive with them on the defensive side of the football. And these guys that have been around for a couple years that haven't played a whole lot, can they step into these bigger roles? And how do you put those responsibilities on their shoulder for a guy like Nick Barrett, who, again, has been around forever, it seems like, but is now being in that featured primary starter role when it comes to the interior to the defensive line. At least that's what we anticipate going into the season. Again, how do all these guys step up to those challenges goes back to Clayton White and this defensive staff when it comes to the offseason development and all those kind of things that give you that opportunity to be competitive. So we'll see. You hope that if there is a step back this year, which, again, at least early in the season, you should expect, they're not going to look the same they did a year ago. Yeah, you still got Dylan Stewart coming off the edge, but he doesn't have a Kyle Kennard complimenting him as of right now. Not saying somebody can't step up to the challenge and be that, but as of right now, we don't know who that is in terms of the other side of the of the defensive line when it comes to the edge spot. So got to be patient a little bit. You hope that the step back is not significant. We were talking about Brian Kelly a little bit earlier, where, he had an all-world offense with a Heisman Trophy quarterback, elite receivers, all that kind of stuff 2 years ago, but the defense couldn't stop anyone. And you hope with what is expected to be one of the better quarterbacks in college football this upcoming season in Lenore Sellers, you hope you don't run into a situation where you're having to score 55 points a game because your defense is giving up 49. You know what I mean? Like, you hope that even with maybe taking a little step back on the defensive side of the football, it's still good enough to be competitive in the SEC. Because, again, if you don't have a defense, you're going to get chewed up and spit out. I don't care how good your offense is. You can only be so successful and go so far in the SEC if you don't have defense to back things up and keep those opponents, at bay. So we'll see. Again, hoping to be able to be in the neighborhood of replicating what this team was able to do a year ago when it came to the defensive side of the football. We'll jump back into our conversation from yesterday with Brett Kellner of Texas Sports Unfiltered coming up next, and then our guy Michael Felder going to join me at the bottom of the hour to yap about college football and everything going on across the landscape of the sport as the Tuesday edition of the Halftime Show with Tyler Red and Captain Dave rolls on here on the game. Elijah Campbell, Captain Dave, hanging out with you on your Monday here on the game. We're continuing our tour around the SEC as we get closer to the start of the 2025 season. We now head out to Austin, Texas. Welcoming in Brad Keller of Texas Sports Unfiltered. Brad, first of all, hope you're feeling better today. Thank you for taking your time. How are we doing today?
Hey, doing great, guys. Voice isn't quite all the way there, but it's much better now than it was going into the weekend. So appreciate y'all being patient and having me on today.
Well, I did a women's softball World Series title. Help you feel a little bit better as well?
I was doing too much celebrating over the weekend. Maybe that's why my voice is gone. That was pretty fun to watch, man. Unexpected, but a nice run for the Longhorns in Oklahoma City. And, I know a lot of folks down here really proud that they were able to won the first softball national title in school history.
As we kind of zero in on football here, again, you've only been in the league for 1 year, but you came in and did what a lot of people didn't think Texas could do, go in there and win a lot of games, make it the SEC championship game and make it further than anybody did in the college football playoff, coming up just short in the semifinals for the second year in a row. Going into 2025, and we talked about earlier with the roster being as expensive as it is, whether it's $25 million, $40 million, whatever, it's got to be natty or bust at this point, right?
It sure feels that way, right? I mean, when you make it to the semifinals of the college football playoff 2 years in a row, it's hard to say getting back there would be a failed season because there are a lot of schools around the country that would kill to be one of the Final Four teams standing in college football. But when you get that close a couple of years in a row, you want to take that next step. And Texas, they've been desperate. It's been 20 years since they've won a national title. So, yeah, it's natty or bust. Feels like a lot, but there are a lot of folks around Texas and a lot of folks who support the Longhorns who are kind of echoing similar sentiments going into this 2025 season.
Yeah, the expectations are high, Brad, as you know, and nationally, anytime you have a quarterback last named Manning and can trace the lineage to the Mannings, I think that adds.
Wait, that's the same family?
I think. Yeah, I think. I don't know. It's not mentioned enough, so I mean, it's left to interpretation. But look, Arch is going to have a full year as the guy. We've seen what he can do in stretches, and I love watching him run the football because he definitely doesn't look like his uncles when he does, but a lot of great athleticism. We've seen what he can do in spot starts against, Mississippi State, Louisiana Monroe, a select few plays here and there in some big games, but we haven't seen the full array of Arch Manning. We haven't gotten a full Arch Manning experience for an entire season. What do you expect for us to see from Arch Manning this year that we just haven't been able to see yet because he's been behind Quinn Ewers these last couple of years?
Yeah, that's the $1 million or really, $10 million question, however much Arch is making in his NIL deals right now, right? I mean, the skill set is absolutely there. And I think, he's going to benefit, and I think Texas is going to benefit by the fact that this is his third year with Texas, right? It's very rare in today's era of NIL and the transfer portal that a guy as talented as Arch Manning, especially at the quarterback position, is willing to sit it out and wait his turn. And go into year three without having started a whole lot of games. So that's the good news, right? He knows the offense. He knows his teammates. He's appeared in a number of college football games over the last couple of seasons. So, just because he's a first-year starter doesn't mean he's a first-time starter, and he should be pretty well equipped to take over the reins of this Texas offense. But, the Longhorns are losing a lot on that side of the football. 4 of their 5 offensive line starters from a year ago are gone. Now, their second-best running back is gone. 3 of their top 4 receivers from last year are off to the NFL. Their number 1 tight end is gone, too. So, Arch Manning, he's got his work cut out for him a little bit because it's not that same cast of characters that helped Texas get to the college football playoff semifinal on offense. It's a lot of new faces that'll be breaking into the offense with Arch this year. So, the skill set is there. I mean, he's a supreme talent. We saw it in a small sample size last year. Obviously, the genes are there, too. Everybody knows the family lineage. But, the expectations are sky high. It's pretty crazy to think that a guy with 2 starts under his belt is one of the favorites to win the Heisman Trophy and is one of the favorites to be the number 1 pick in next year's draft. But I guess that comes with the territory of being next of kin of the first family of football.
Again, talking to Brad Keller of Texas Sports Unfiltered about the Longhorns for 2025. You mentioned all those guys drafted, and again, went out in the portal, got talent, got a lot of guys coming back. What's the biggest hole on this team left behind by those guys that aren't on the team anymore?
Yeah, it's a great question. Before the transfer portal this offseason, I would have said the defensive line, but Texas went out and got 5 defensive linemen from the portal. So, questions of how good are the guys that they brought in? Are they good enough to handle an SEC season? And obviously Texas has to play at Ohio State to open up the year, so it's not the easiest schedule in the world. But I think they patched up the D-line. I'd probably say offensive line. Again, 4 starters gone from last year's team. You know, Texas's offensive line was one of the 3 finalists for the Joe Moore Award as the top O-line in football in 2024. So, you know, they're replacing a top 10 pick in Kelvin Banks. 3 of those guys got drafted. The other one signed a pretty big UDFA deal. So they've got guys waiting in the wing, but they didn't go out in the portal to address the offensive line. They're just banking on their recruiting out of high school and development being good enough to offset those losses. So, you know, it helps Arch Manning a lot more mobile than Quinn Ewers. That was one of Quinn Ewers' drawbacks. So, you know, if your offensive line isn't quite as good, it helps having a quarterback who can extend plays and pick up yards with his legs. You guys know that very well. Yeah, I think the offensive line is probably the biggest question right now for this Texas team.
And another thing that's going to help Arch, too, is having a defense that's just not going to give up a lot of points. I mean, I'm looking at the roster right now, the guys that are returning, and there's just so many contributors. And that's the thing I think where Texas is probably at right now. You can lose some dudes on one side of the ball and just reload because Sark is that type of recruiter. But what's maybe the expectation for this defense this year, having so many guys back on a team that was so successful in the SEC last year?
Yeah, I think the defense has to carry the load, especially early on, right? While the offense is trying to break in all of those new starters. You know, the defense lost a lot. I mean, Jahdae Barron won the Thorpe Award last year. He was a first-round pick to the Broncos. Andrew Makuba, the Clemson transfer, was great in his 1 year at Texas, was a second-round pick to the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, those guys won't be easy to replace. But, I mean, Texas has an all-American caliber player at all 3 levels of the defense, right? Colin Simmons was the Sean Alexander Freshman of the Year. I know you guys had a pretty good one up front too, but Colin Simmons is a stud pass rusher. He's got future first-round pick aspirations. You know, Anthony Hill, when we get to SEC Media Days next month, I fully expect him to be a first-team all-preseason SEC linebacker. I think he's got a shot to be an All-American this year. And then Michael Tapp, the safety. One of the returnees from Texas's secondary. He was an All-American last year, and he was really, really good. So Texas has that superstar caliber player at all 3 levels, and they also have a ton of other guys back from last year's team. They recruited incredibly well there as well. So, yeah, you know, long answer short, the expectations are really high for this Texas defense. It was a top 5 unit in the country last year, and it probably should be again this year.
And talking to Brad Kellner of Texas Sports Unfiltered for a couple more minutes here on the halftime show. You know, Texas is one of those polarizing brands in college sports in general, always has been, especially in college football. They come into the SEC. They have the success they do right away. Does Texas like being the villain? Because they are portrayed by the villain as by a lot of people outside of that bubble in Austin, Texas. Do you get a sense they enjoy that kind of moniker around that program there?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I'll speak for myself more than the rest of the fan base, right? Like, I definitely enjoy it because for years, you know, Texas fans heard once the move was announced that Texas and Oklahoma were headed to the SEC back in 2021, it was, you guys, you don't know what it's like. You don't have a chance. You're not built for this. You're not ready for this. And for Texas to go in and make the SEC championship game in year 1 in football and obviously, you know, dominate the rest of the sports. I mean, Texas won 9 SEC championships this year, which was more than twice as many as anybody else did. So for the Longhorns to walk into the league, I know I'm not helping the reputation of brash, arrogant Texas fans with these comments here. But, no, for Texas to go into the league despite, you know, 3-4 years of being told they weren't going to be good enough and have the year that they did, it was pretty enjoyable from a fan perspective, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, an embarrassment of riches on year 1. Well, one player I'd like to ask you about, too, because I was highly intrigued by his skill set going into last year and having a full season as the guy at that position. But C.J. Baxter didn't get to play. Wisner's coming back this year, too. The running back room still looks just as loaded as it was last year. But what are you kind of expecting to see from C.J. Baxter this year and what that room is going to look like going into maybe help Arch Manning as much as he can as this offense does kind of get assimilated next season?
Yeah, that's a quarterback's best friend, right? A good running game. And I think Texas has one of the deepest running games in the country. I don't know if they have top 3 to 5 running back in America. I don't know if they've got a Doak Walker candidate on this team, but in terms of depth, I mean, Trey Wisner's the only returning 1,000-yard rusher in the SEC. C.J. Baxter was the number 1 running back recruit out of high school a couple of years ago. Now, he's coming off a pretty serious knee injury that caused him to miss all of last year. It caused him to miss all of this spring as well. So I don't know exactly what the expectations are for him. He looked pretty good as a freshman in 2023, but again, coming off of a pretty serious knee injury, if he's the kind of guy he looked like a couple of seasons ago, then he's got a chance to be really good for this Texas offense. And the big question is, Jaden Blue is the guy off to the NFL. Blue scored both touchdowns for Texas in that playoff loss to Ohio State, and they were both receiving touchdowns. He was a great weapon in the passing game out of the backfield. Trey Wisner's hands are solid. C.J. Baxter has solid hands. Texas has a couple of other guys who are good in the passing game, but can they replace that element in the passing game out of the backfield that they're losing for Jaden Blue? I think that will be big for Steve Sarkisian's offense because he really likes to rely on the running backs in this passing game. So, top to bottom, Texas, one of the deepest running back rooms in the country. We'll see what they get from C.J. Baxter. And again, we'll see what that passing game looks like with Jaden Blue off with the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL.
He is Brad Kellner of Texas Sports Unfiltered. We appreciate you taking your time, man, and definitely a team to be watching this fall in Texas.
Anytime, guys. Appreciate y'all.
Welcome back in. It is the halftime show. Tyler Head, Cap and Dave along with you here on your Tuesday on the game. Time to talk some college football with our guy, Michael Felder. First of all, appreciate you being available on such short notice. I don't know if Terry detailed his issues to you, but he's still stuck in Baltimore with a car that's not one to cooperate. So thanks for being available.
Hey, man, no problem. Always got time for you guys, and it's always fun to talk. And I'll lead off with this before you even get to ask me.
Okay.
I think your state has the best quarterback situation of any state with respect to college football.
Okay, I can't think of a better place to start than with that right there. It's kind of a rarefied air, too, for South Carolina, right? There's been plenty of good quarterbacks in the history of this program, the Connor Shaws and stuff like that. When Rattler came in a couple years ago, he the year before had been one of the favorites for the Heisman and was thought of very highly going into both of his seasons as Carolina's quarterback. But the hype has truly never been higher than what we're going to have with Sellers going into this 2025 season on Heisman shortlist, on projected first-round drafts, and all those kind of things. Something that's never really happened before for this program.
Yeah, Lenore Sellers can do a lot, and I'm ramping up for the season, and so he is. I've got Arch today, but he's right behind Arch on what guys I need to see. The cool thing with Sellers is I've already seen a lot of him, and I don't know if this is the way that I think about it, because I know that there are teams that have bigger, faster, stronger players, especially with the losses that South Carolina took to the NFL draft. Which, by the way, when you get that many big humans drafted, you have to find a way to replace them, which is fine. But the thing for me is I at least have seen enough of him playing compared to C.J. Carr, who I've never seen play in a football game at Notre Dame, Julian Sion, who I've never seen play in a football game. And we're talking about Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Gunnar Stockton, who we saw play a little bit last year, and then obviously Arch Manning. I know more about Lenore Sellers. I know more about Kate Klubnik than I know about any of those guys. But they absolutely are on my must-watch list for teams that have an opportunity not just to make the playoff, but to carry their teams to a championship.
And I think you have to look at Sellers' situation as well when you kind of compare him to a Klubnik, to a Arch Manning, these other kind of guys that are thought to be Nussmeier as well, the better quarterbacks in college football this upcoming season. Doesn't quite have the wealth of talent around him as of right now that these other teams have. Again, the offensive line was an issue a year ago. We still don't know if Rasul Faison's going to be eligible at running back. Wide receiver is good, but not great, at least not at this point. So Sellers probably going to have to do more heavy lifting himself compared to what some of those other quarterbacks might have to do.
I think he's got a big back. He's strong enough to carry it, man. Honestly, answer in a nutshell.
So certainly hope that that's the case this upcoming season. Kind of looking at some other things, you put out your tier list recently when it comes to ranking college football programs. Kind of explain to people where you put South Carolina and why that's the case.
I think South Carolina's in them. They're like borderline tier 2, tier 3, where they're a team. Like if they get hot, and as you mentioned, if we can get everybody eligible, if we can get rolling, and I think that's the most interesting part. They are entering from a complete opposite place than Notre Dame, Ohio State, Georgia, because they have a quarterback that they know. They have a quarterback that they can trust. They have a quarterback that can be a leader. And I kind of equate them to a guy like Jalen Milroe, right? Sellers has the ability. We know that he's the leader of this football team. So for me, if he gets good, same thing with Nussmeier at LSU. We know he's already good. We've watched him play. If they hit the ground running and can take off first, these other teams are still finding out who they are with these young quarterbacks, inexperienced quarterbacks, transfer quarterbacks. They're still finding out who they are. So I think that if they can go wire to wire, this is a team that I absolutely expect to see in the playoff when we get to December, and they have an opportunity to really go out and make waves.
And given the fact that you're not quite in this Columbia bubble, I like to ask these kind of questions from a more national perspective. Beamer's been here for 4 years. He's the winningest coach through 4 years in South Carolina football history, but it's had its ups and downs, right? Year number one, you overachieved. Year number two, go out there and pull off those two big upsets at the end of the season. Dip in year number three, and then a 9-1 season in year number 4. Is the perception of Beamer still like, okay, it's a little up and down, or is it, okay, he's got this program in a really good place right now, and this is going to be the standard for them going forward?
I think it's a good place. I think it should be the standard going forward. I think they also, if you look at this schedule, obviously this is the Benz. The game at the Benz is going to be very interesting because folks at Virginia Tech still really like him, and they are. I actually was doing radio up there, and they were like, "Man, what if we would have just fired our guy? We would have him." So the idea that they're jealous that they don't have him, that's a thing. And then, South Carolina State, okay, Vandy, take care of business. At Mizzou, take care of business. Kentucky, that's always going to be a weird game because I have no idea what Kentucky looks like this year. Do you?
Not really. I mean, Zach Calzada playing his 12th year of college football after being an Incarnate Word for a couple years. Who knows, right? Right.
So, but at LSU, which we get a really good showdown between Sellers and Nussmeier, that's fantastic. Oklahoma is going to be interesting. But I will tell you this. You guys are really going to like when the Oklahoma fans come to town. And then obviously hosting Bama as well. And then you go to an Ole Miss team. And I wish you guys got Ole Miss earlier. I'll say this because Lane Kiffin by November probably will have something figured out. But we'll see. A&M, how do you guys feel about A&M?
And obviously Carolina was able to beat them last year when they were, a top 10 team. I don't think they're looked at quite as threateningly as they have been in years past. Again, Marcel Reed going to go into his second year as a starter can certainly improve as well. But I feel like that's a team that we haven't talked about quite as much this offseason because it feels like maybe just because Carolina made such an emphatic statement by beating them the way that they did last year, they're not one that I think is high on the list of priorities, high list of concern, I guess, in terms of looking at the schedule this upcoming year.
Right, then you get Coastal, and then obviously the Clemson game is going to be the end all to be all in terms of that's not your Super Bowl, but that's certainly a game that I think both of those teams I think Clemson and South Carolina could walk into that game based upon the schedules, based upon the players, based upon the personnel, based upon the coaching. They could walk into that game in Williams-Brice, which is good for y'all. They could walk into that game and both teams could be at least in the top 12. Vying for a spot, and then Clemson obviously is probably going to get that bonus game that'll get them in. If they lose, they'll get the bonus game in the ACC championship game. But for you guys, I think getting to an SEC championship game, that means you're in no matter what, right?
Oh no, without a doubt, no. Yeah, if you're based on the way it works now, if you're in the top 2 in the SEC, there's no way you're not making the college football playoff.
Big up. I'm excited. So I drive to South Carolina every single week.
Okay.
Because I live in South Charlotte. So I drive into South Carolina every week because I go and get gas. I use my Harris Teeter fuel point, and I drive every week. And I am seeing the rev up from fans already from both sides. Mm-hmm. But I'm seeing the rev up, for real. And so it's very cool to see this full rev up for this season. And I want it to go well. And, this is me I'm sitting back, everybody keeps asking me about Bill Belichick. Yep. Because I went to UNC, which, by the way, every time you say Carolina, my skin crawls a little bit because I went to UNC. We call ourselves Carolina.
Of course.
It's exciting to see how excited everyone is.
Well, and we got about 2 more minutes here with Michael Felder. Okay. I would have otherwise brought up a Belichick question, but for UNC, that nothing's really happened these past couple of weeks, which is probably good for them, right?
That's, man, yeah. The last few months, so from tip to tail, it was truly. I had people telling me that the hire was going to happen, and I tried to tell people that the hire was going to happen. Nobody believed me. Then the hire happens, and they're like, okay, this is going to be great. And then I talked to some friends. I have 2 friends that work for Belichick in New England, and they're like, he hates people. And I was like, you can't hate people and work at UNC. Because, remember, think about Dean Smith, Mac Brown. You think about all these guys. What are they good at? Talking to people, shaking hands, kissing babies, all that stuff. And it's been wild to watch. He's not doing local news really. Yeah. He's doing CBS. He's doing NFL Network. He did the NFL draft. And so
he's doing what Jordan will allow him to do, right?
Well, see, yes.
I had to throw it in there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you did. And guess what? I had friends that went to not the spring game, the final spring practice, and most of them left early. They were like, this is a waste. Like, we don't know anything about this football team. We didn't get to see anything. And also, she put on a show during the game, and she didn't even win the pageant that she was in.
That's right. She did. Yeah, she was runner-up or something like that. So nobody needs the season to start worse than North Carolina. But hey, only 83 days away.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, man. I'm in the middle of swim season right now, so I don't have to go to the pool today. But Thursday we got to meet, and I can tell you what, these kids swim meets going until 10 o'clock is insane.
Oh man, I believe it. Again, appreciate you being available on short notice, man. Take care.
All good, man. You take it easy.
All right, he's Michael Felder, always down to talk some college football with us. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 2. Hit the Firehouse Subs text of the hour at 803-404-6100 here on the halftime show on the game. Welcome back in, Tyler and Captain Dave, wrapping up hour number 2 of the halftime show. Again, thanks to Mike Felder for being available and chat some college football with us there. Go Firehouse Subs, text the hour, 803-404-6100. Michael asks, hey, do you think Dylan Stewart over under 11.5 sacks this upcoming season? I'd love to say over, because that would be pretty darn special, and that would, if he can get to 13, he would tie Jadeveon Clowney's single season record. If he gets above 11.5, then he would have more than Kyle Kennard had a season ago. So would go down as one of the best seasons for an edge player in South Carolina football history. And you know that Dylan Stewart certainly has the skills and capability to be able to do that. My question, and this is one of the bigger questions of a defense that has a lot of questions this season, is who's going to be that guy on the other side, right? Like last year, you had the ideal scenario when it came to edge rushers. You had a veteran guy on one side that had played a lot of college football and had decent production that ended up obviously having a monster year last year in Kyle Kennard. And then you had the young, phenomenal freshman in Dylan Stewart on the other side, where it was kind of pick your poison, right? Like, all right, well, we can double team Kyle Kennard, but that's going to open up more lanes for Dylan Stewart to get to us. Or we can double team Dylan Stewart, and that's going to open up more lanes and availability for Kyle Kennard. So you had threats coming off both sides. I don't know if you have that this upcoming season. And what does that mean? Well, even more attention can be focused on Dylan Stewart if they feel like the threat isn't there from the other side. Now, again, this room is not without bodies. You got Brian Thomas Jr., JT Gear, you got Clowney and Wilson and guys like that, out of the transfer portal. Desmond Umeozulu, who's come back for another year. Who can step up and fill that role? Who can fill that void that Kyle Kennard left behind to at least alleviate some of the attention being paid to Dylan Stewart? Because, again, when you're making the scouting report for South Carolina football, he's going to be a number one on your list. He's going to be the first guy you have to account for, the first guy you have to take care of every single game. And if all that attention goes to him, that opens up that other lane on the other side for somebody else to get after the passer. Now, if you can have a consistent pass rush coming off the other side, put teams in a situation to make that choice once again, then that's where Dylan Stewart, I think, can be successful. Now, I'm saying this as well to say that Dylan Stewart, even when he was getting double teamed, sometimes was able to blow through that anyway. Running over tight ends, getting through the running back that was chipping or whatever it may be, and still have success. But when you're up against that throughout the entire season, it's a lot harder to get to some of these high numbers when it comes sacks and things like that. So if you can get a player or a couple of guys on the other side that can replicate the success that Kyle Kennard had, or at least the threat that Kyle Kennard had, that I think can allow Dylan Stewart to be successful. So I'm going to go optimist here. I'm going to go over with my fingers crossed and very, very hopeful that those other guys in the room can step up and be the, secondary pass rusher that Dylan Stewart needs to be successful, to be more successful in his own right. And again, we're going to have to see. And maybe it's not one guy. Maybe it is a combination of guys. But that would certainly mean that South Carolina's defense probably has a good year if Dylan Stewart is wrapping up that amount of sacks. That'll do it for hour number 2. Coming up in hour number 3, Elijah Campbell going to jump in here with me. We'll hit what's trending at 2 and also get to the greatest day in the history of the world, as well as the halftime show rolls along. Tyler Head and Captain Dave here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the halftime show. It's our head Captain Dave. I believe Elijah Campbell's going to be joining us here coming up in a couple minutes as we navigate our way through the final hour of the day here on this Tuesday on the game. It is time for what's trending at 2, as always, this time of day. By the way, real quick before we get into that, of course, Elijah Campbell of the post-game show. He and Jay on Thursday will be out at Angry Fish Brewing out in Lexington from 3 until 6 p.m. So go by and see those guys hang out as they, help you count down until the start of the college football season. I don't think they've done a live show in a few weeks. So, go by and see them, Angry Fish Brewing, out there in Lexington if you get the chance to go hang out this upcoming Thursday. It's time for What's Trending at 2, and we'll start off with the destination of Lee Corso's final college game day show. Drum roll. Yeah, not really a surprise. Texas and Ohio State in the Horseshoe up in Columbus will indeed be the site of the final time that Lee Corso is on the college game day desk. I think we all saw this coming. Of course, he has quite the affinity for Ohio State. That was the first ever mascot that he put on, was Brutus the Buckeye. There was maybe some belief that he might go to Alabama, Florida State later on in the year, later on in the day, that little bit later game there, because Florida State is, of course, his alma mater. And I do think it's interesting as well, because this is going to be, now that I think about it, actually, that Texas-Ohio State game is a noon kick on Fox. Big noon Saturday, the first big game of the season for them. So Lee Corso's final headgear, I'm assuming, is going to be done inside the stadium, because when College Game Day broadcast from a noon kick like they did here at South Carolina, for that final hour of the show, they move everybody inside. So they were set up on the sideline here, at South Carolina prior to that kick against LSU, and for that noon kick out there in the Horseshoe, I'm assuming, yeah. Well, which that's kind of sad, right? Like I was hoping that we'd get Lee Corso's final headgear in front of the crowd that's right there behind the stage. And there's obviously going to be people in the stadium that can see it, though I guess Ohio State could put it on the video board, because that doesn't typically happen. If you were here for the LSU game last year, while game day is wrapping up, they don't put it on the big screen or anything like that for the entire stadium to see. But maybe, given the circumstances, they'll put it on the video board there at the Ohio Stadium, and the entire however many 80, 90,000, 100 people can react to his final headgear. I'm going to go out on a limb. Not really. I'm going to predict he's going to pick Ohio State. May as well bookend Buckeye and Buckeye when it comes to headgear predictions for Lee Corso, and that is going to be a emotional show for a lot of reasons, right? And I'm glad. I said this when this was announced a while back, that was going to be his final show. I'm glad he gets to go out on his own terms, right? Now again, he's still hopefully got to be in good health when we get there, because we still got less than 3 months till the season starts. But I hope that he's in good shape. He can get through that show all the way and not have any problems, because there was a concern, these past couple of years, and again, he's had the stroke and all those other health problems, that it was going to get to the point where he just was not going to be able to physically do it, right? And as you've seen the past couple of years, when he's missed some shows or has only been there for the last segment of the show and all those kind of things, you get kind of concerned, man, I just hope that his health doesn't prevent him from just doing it altogether, and we don't have to have a hard stop and say, okay, well, he can't do it anymore. And I guess that's why typically you'd probably want a farewell tour kind of thing, where hey, you can take him to every city, say it's final time going here, final time going there, and really let it build throughout the entire season. But again, his health may just not be in a place where that is likely going to be possible. So I do like one final, bang of a show with, Texas and Ohio State. And again, gives them the opportunity to do to get it all done in one swoop. And again, you get all the honors and stuff like that. I'm sure there'll be a ton of guests on the show from over the years. And again, I fully expect him to adorn the Brutus the Buckeye head one more time to kind of bookend all of his picks in this entirety of College Game Day, which is, again, going to be emotional for all of us because no matter your age, whether if you're a kid like me that grew up in the mid-2000s on College Game Day or somebody that's new to the sport as a youngster or somebody that's been watching for the past 40 years, everybody loves Lee Corso. He's been college football's lovable grandpa for a very long time. And, again, we knew the end of his time on the show was definitely drawing near. But seeing that final one, that's definitely going to hit pretty hard. I'm not going to lie. So that's going to be coming up 81 days from now because, again, that's on Saturday with Carolina playing on Sunday to see his final headgear prediction at Texas, Ohio State up there in the Horseshoe for Big Noon Saturday. And what should be a pretty fun matchup between two teams that, again, just played each other in the college football playoff semifinals back at the end of last year. Dave, let's hit a little bit of sound here. Give me cut number 6 once again. This was last night out in Durham, North Carolina.
1, 2 outs, the 2-2. Ground ball to first. Ball game. Murray State has done it. Upset in Durham. The Racers race on to Omaha.
That was called last night on ESPN as the Murray State Racers, yes, indeed, have punched their ticket to the College World Series, one of the final 8 teams standing, defeating Duke 5-4 last night. I told this to Terry earlier as Elijah Campbell joins me now. Murray State had to win that game twice because they thought they had the game won on a interference call at second base that would have resulted in a double play. So what do? They come piling out of the dugout, dog pile in the middle of the field, taking jerseys off, celebrating. Oh, wait a minute. Got to go to review. So they had to recompose themselves, still get those final outs, which to me was even more impressive because that kind of felt like one of those things like, oh, man, they already used the energy. They're excited. They're not going to be able to get refocused. Duke's about to break their heart, but they held on.
I was so concerned. As soon as I saw they overruled it, which – To be fair, it's a fair overruling. I don't think that he slid too far out of the way. That's just something that I guess just happens, in baseball. But it's one of those things where I was like, oh, this is where they lose it now. This is going to be the thing. Like Murray State athletics forever is they're going to remember the one time that they think they made the College World Series only for it to be overturned. They're going to have the images of them celebrating forever because those cameras are flashing as soon as that last out is assumed to be recorded.
Sure.
Only for it to actually not matter at the end. I had a terrible feeling about it, but then immediately ground out to first, game over. Don't have to worry about it anyway.
And you're right. The call was correct at the end of the day. I'm glad it didn't end that way.
Yes.
Because,
oh, man.
College baseball and the tournament is so thrilling, and you would hate to see something so subjective end one team season in Dukes and obviously elevate Murray State to the College World Series. And again, at the end of the day, the result didn't end up changing. Murray State wins anyway, but I'm glad we got a proper finish to what's been a pretty exciting tournament so far.
Can you imagine that, like at the beginning of this tournament, the entire event, if I would have told you that there'd be 7 different leagues represented. And yes, I know Oregon State's independent, but I'm counting them as Pac-12. They are one of the 2 lone survivors of the Pac-12. And
is it next year they're going to join the West Coast Conference, or is that just basketball?
They were in the WCC in basketball this year.
Okay.
And I think baseball they chose to be independent.
Gotcha.
Just so they could schedule harder.
I guess so. But yeah, that's a tough road to hoe, certainly. Would it have surprised you if I told you only 2 SEC teams made it to the Final 8?
Absolutely. Would be stunned. I would have assumed you probably would have gotten half the field. Because last year, didn't we get almost the entire thing was the SEC,
I think it was
ACC?
Split 4-4 or something close to that. And that's kind of the standard. And again, when you, like basketball, put a record number of teams in the tournament, it's like, oh, well, duh, the numbers are on your side. You had half of the top 16 national seeds, and, it just didn't work out that way. Again, you had the Vanderbilt #1 overall seed going down.
Mm-hmm.
Texas doesn't get very far. Like, was kind of a topsy-turvy tournament, something we don't often see.
Yeah, that's I was on the phone with Jay earlier today. We're doing our pre-show meeting, and he mentioned, he's like, yeah, I wonder if Greg Sankey's going to make a call. And I was like, buddy, I don't know what else they could say to him. Like, hey, I don't know if we could gotten Vanderbilt a worse 4 seed than Wright State. I don't know if we could have gotten Texas a better or worse 2 or 3 seed than the Conference USA winner.
Do you think Greg Sankey is working for AQs automatically into the College World Series? We play such a hard conference, we shouldn't have to go through regionals and super regionals. I think we should just go ahead and have some spots locked up in Omaha.
This is one of the reasons why the whole proposed automatic qualifier thing for the college football playoff was so stupid, because now you've opened yourself up to jokes like this.
And again, we
asked for this.
We are in the SEC, so it's in our best interest for the conference to be great, but I can understand how ridiculous this looks from the outside when people are like, you're just asking to be 10 steps ahead of everyone.
To just have it handed to you.
Yeah, just have it handed to you. And again, this reinforces why these tournaments are the way that they are. Because you do have to go through the gauntlet. You do have to survive the regional. You do have to survive the super regional to get the opportunity to play at Omaha. Sometimes the number 4 seed squeaks their way through. Yeah. For only the 4th time ever is Murray State doing that.
Yeah, other conferences play ball too. Sometimes they play really good ball.
I make the argument earlier that, and I'll loop in Oral Roberts 2 years ago as well, I think what Murray State and Oral Roberts have done is even more impressive than the Stony Brooks and Fresno States. Now, Fresno State did win the national championship, so they've got the standard right now.
They won it all.
But getting to this point, just making it to Omaha, in today's world of college sports with the portal and NIL, they're at a distinct disadvantage. I mean,
a larger one than ever.
A larger one than ever. And they're, it was Matt Brown of the Extra Points newsletter, I think it was back in the regionals, that put out the budgets for the different baseball programs in Tennessee and Arkansas and Texas. They're in the 10 to 13 million range. Murray State's like 800,000, and that's not NIL. That's total budget for your program, facilities, uniforms, travel, all of that. Less than $1 million, and they have bested so many of those programs.
Yeah. Have you seen the pictures of Murray State's field, their home stadium?
I'm looking at it right now.
There are no stands. There's almost no stands.
Dan Skirka mows the grass.
Yeah, the coach
cuts the grass.
The coach maintains the field. The stands are 2 grassy knolls that sit on both sides, the first and third baselines. There's nowhere for people to sit.
Do you think he has a zero turn, or just I don't know, old school Briggs and Stratton that he brings from home on a little tow trailer?
I want to say he's push mowing this thing.
Push mowing. That's
what
even better.
That's what I want to think. I think
that's even better.
Or, it'd be even funnier if he's got some Ryobi battery charged push mower that he has to he gets out there to mow it, at the beginning of the season. It's the battery's not charged, and then has to sit and let that thing wait, because those chargers take 2 days to fully charge.
I enjoy cutting the grass. It's therapeutic for me. I got to imagine a baseball coach with all that's on your mind constantly, spend a couple hours out there mowing the field, getting all the lines right. That's going to be actually kind of nice. Maybe more coaches should mow their own fields.
I think there is a contingency of coaches that do enjoy doing that, because coaches at all levels of college sports, a lot of them are control freaks, and that's why they are the way they are, and that's why a lot of them are so successful, is because they have their hands on everything.
Yep.
So I think part of them probably wouldn't mind it, because you know what? If the field's bad today, I have no one to blame but myself.
Exactly.
Right? I think there's a lot of coaches that take that mentality. But the fact that that's the type of program that just got done going to the Oxford Regional, beating a team in Ole Miss who won a national championship this decade, and then going on the road to a Duke team out of the mighty ACC and beating them in the manner that they did, that's what makes college sports so great. This type of run is what makes these type of events so special.
College World Series gets rolling a little later on this week out in Omaha, and the team they beat last night, they're looking for a new head coach. We'll dive into that coming up next as What's Trending at 2 continues. It's our head Elijah Campbell, Captain Dave on the halftime show here in the game. Welcome back into the halftime show. Tyler Head, Elijah Campbell, Captain Dave, along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. Continuing on with what's string at 2. We talked about Murray State punching their ticket to Omaha at the end of the last segment there. The flip side of things is Duke, by getting eliminated, now looking for a new head coach. As Chris Pollard is heading over to UVA to take over that vacant spot for that program after their coach left for the Mississippi State job just a couple of days ago. So the coaching carousel spinneth in college baseball.
Yeah, I'm sure there were no discussions before that game between
not at all,
between Pollard and Virginia. None at all. Tampering, I guess, is fine with coaches.
And that's one of those things. Look, Virginia has obviously been a very successful program. They've made it 3 of the last 4 College World Series. And when you look at what Duke's done under Chris Pollard, they've been there so close so many times, getting to Supers once again, just coming up again, 1 run short as of last night. And now it kind of feels like you're going back to square one, right? Because you have that coach that's, and I don't know what the resources for Duke baseball are. They're probably not the highest compared to a lot of other programs in the ACC like Clemson and Virginia. So he's probably doing a lot more with less, which is what made him probably very appealing to UVA. But now it's like, okay, now Duke, what do you do? Yeah. And can you have the same kind of success?
You have to find an overachiever somewhere. Like Duke's not going to be able to poach a coach that's in this College World Series unless they take Murray State's coach, right? Which would be hilariously ironic. But that's the thing. Like at a place like Duke, you are in a conference that is so loaded with talent. And one of the reasons why that conference is so loaded is because he overachieved at Duke. I mean, it's not a baseball school. It's a school that hasn't been to Omaha since 1961.
Right.
Like this isn't Arizona. This isn't Texas or anything like that, right? I mean, he's had to do a whole lot more with less. And if Duke wants to get back to it, they're going to have to find themselves one of those overachiever type coaches. And look, that's a big loss, man, because he's taken 3 super regionals, and one this past one was the one that hurts because it's the one they finally got to host. They're playing a 4 seed,
4th super regional actually.
Yeah, wow, 4th.
Yeah, 4th.
I remember the best team he's probably ever had there was when they went to Vanderbilt and they got Kumar Rockard, and what I think is probably the greatest individual college baseball pitching performance I've ever seen or ever will see in my life.
Yep.
Not many people are striking out 19 batters in a game. But that's exactly what happened to him in that game. And man, if you're Duke, expect a few years of being pretty bad because I have a feeling Coach Pollard's going to bring a lot of his players with him to Virginia.
Oh, for sure. And remember, right at this time a year ago, he was in the running for the South Carolina job. He was one of the strong candidates named before, obviously, Coach Maneri ended up taking it. We're having these same conversations like, hey, here's a guy that's done a lot at a school that probably doesn't have the same amount of resources going towards baseball that other schools have. So, I mean, again, he should be able to slide right into Virginia and keep them on the track of where they've been consistently competing for and playing in College World Series.
Yeah, I kind of put him and Tom Walter at Wake Forest in a very similar class there in terms of guys that are that do so much to win at places that don't have a history of consistent winning.
Sure.
And it's one of those things, too, that both those guys have been there for so long where it's like, how have you not gotten another job yet? Right? Unless you just don't want to leave where you're at. And if you think about it from Chris Pollard's perspective, too, this is really the best time to cash out, right? I mean, Virginia is a really good baseball school. They have a national championship pedigree. They've been to Omaha as early as last year, right? I'm old enough to remember the last time they went, which is just last year.
Yep.
It's a program that will fund your operation a lot better than where you're at right now.
Do you think Chris Pollard, as we're entering the revenue share era, can look at whatever budget they have allocated for baseball and like, yeah, you want to scrape a little bit off the top there from football and give it towards us? That might be one school you might be actually able to pull that off.
Absolutely. I mean, like that's the fascinating thing about now that the House settlement's been signed and agreed upon and it's signed off on, that schools are going to be faced with the option, or not the option, really the conundrum of where you're going to put that $20.5 million because every coach is going to lobby for as much as humanly possible.
Of course, why wouldn't you?
And you got to tell somebody no.
Yeah.
And if you're at Virginia, do you really want to invest more money or a large chunk of that $20.5 million to try to save your football program, because it takes more than money, as we realize. It takes a whole lot more money, more than money. You got to have the right coach in place. You got to have a staff that develops players. And if you don't think you're getting that in football right now, you're kind of at this juxtaposition of, oh, do we keep giving money to, more money to baseball than other people so we can be not just competitive in that realm, but contending for national titles in that realm? Or do we try to save like the football program? But then when you do that, the other coaches like Chris Pollard be like, hey, look, you spent a lot of money to get me. If you want me to win, get you results and win, you got to invest money in us too.
And I would imagine, again, we don't know the terms of his contract as of right now, but I imagine in the conversations that apparently have only happened since last night, since this game ended, right?
Yeah, they there's no way as soon as the last out, and then started the negotiation.
You want to come coach up here at UVA? Yes, this is the first I've heard of that. I absolutely want to take that job. However long these conversations have been going on, I'm sure that's been brought up. Like, hey, what are you going to give me to allow me to continue to be successful at this already successful baseball program? I'm sure there's something agreed upon to some degree there already.
Oh yeah, because why you shouldn't take that job if you don't get those concessions?
No,
right? You absolutely shouldn't take.
I wouldn't. Because, again, I can stay at Duke and continue to do what I'm doing and overachieve here, or you can give me what I need up there to potentially get you a College World Series title.
And that's the thing between Virginia and Duke. Duke has the one moneymaker on their campus that isn't just a moneymaker, it's a monolith. I mean, like Duke basketball, the rumored NIL deal for Cooper Flagg to play there was like $28 million. That's the rumored. That's crazy.
Insane.
That basketball program generates so much revenue.
But is it crazy for Duke? It's not. No. It's not really.
Oh, they would go winless in every sport not named men's basketball if it meant winning another title.
Yes.
I think they would make that trade-off.
They would happily end every other sport if it meant Duke could go on a run.
Yeah. They absolutely would. If it was up to them, that'd be the only sport. I mean, I don't think anybody at Duke would be incredibly heartbroken outside of the coaching staff and players if the football team, they're just like, you know what, we're just not going to play football anymore. We're just going to focus on
it's like everybody loves Duke basketball, and then the other sports are there to help fill the gap.
Yes.
Right? It's like, all right, football, keep us occupied until first tip. Baseball, okay, go on, have a decent season, but we'll start talking about summer recruiting once that's over.
Oh, the football team went to a bowl game. Good, more money for basketball.
Exactly.
That's where that money is going.
Oh, look, Duke's playing one, town over during that weekend, so we can go to the bowl game and then go to the basketball game.
And then go to the basketball game, yeah. Oh, they're playing in the Pinstripe Bowl? Well, they're playing St. John's at MSG that night, too, so we can go 2 for 1.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a little bit of a different culture there compared to a place like here. One more note here on what's trending at 2. A little bit of a health situation going on with Deion Sanders. Been absent from the team up there in Colorado for the past couple of days. According to, I believe, Shador, that he is okay. Everything seems fine. We don't know the details of what's going on, but something to keep an eye on. I know he's had his health problems. He had some toes amputated, some things like that. So best wishes to Deion, obviously, and hopefully it's nothing too serious.
Yeah, absolutely not. I will say, love him or hate him, the sport is better with Deion Sanders in it.
Oh, 1,000%.
And with Colorado being relevant, right? I mean, I would hate to see a season where he doesn't get to be on the sidelines and make Colorado interesting, because if he's not coaching, Colorado's not interesting.
I've been doing professional radio since 2018, and I can guarantee you probably in the last 2 minutes we've talked about Colorado more in this time than we had the prior years before Deion got there.
Can you remember the first 2 weeks of the 23 season where that's all anyone wanted to talk about was Colorado being good until they fell off a cliff, but that's all anyone wanted to talk about.
Who put out the graphic of hypothetical matchup between them and 2019 LSU? What would the score be? And people are like,
somebody
LSU 90 and this team 3.
Somebody did that. Somebody got so caught up in that moment to put that out.
I think it was one of the betting networks or something like that again, we're just capturing the moment of hysteria, like, oh my God. And then as we learned, no, LSU would have, as they did to everyone, bludgeoned that team.
Yeah, it seems like that's a very FanDuel thing to do. I can't remember if it was FanDuel or not, but I want to accuse them of that.
I think it might have actually been FanDuel now that you think about it. But yes, the Deion hysteria was at an all-time high. It's cooled off. And again, I think we're all ready to see what he's going to be able to do without Shador at quarterback.
Yeah, and a Heisman winner playing your cornerback and wide receiver position.
Yes, legitimately a unicorn of college football playing on both sides of the ball for you. Yeah. So we'll see what year number 3 has in store for Deion Sanders. That's what's trending at 2 coming up next. It's the greatest day in the history of the world, June the 10th, on the halftime show here on The Game. Welcome back in. Halftime show. Tyler Head and Elijah Campbell, along with Captain Dave, along with you here on your Tuesday on the Game. It is time for the greatest day in the history of the world. Always got to go old school. What's the most successful thing you did as a 15-year-old?
The most successful thing I did as a 15-year-old would probably be get in a game on varsity basketball. Okay. Hit a three-pointer in garbage time against Trousdale County. Okay. And then trip going back up the floor.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that was very well documented. Made a blooper reel at our school.
Did you ever think you could make yourself into a Major League Baseball player at the age of 15?
I probably would have convinced myself I could, but there's no way I could.
Well, that's what Joe Nuxall did back in 1944.
Wow.
Became the youngest pitcher in Major League Baseball history at 15 years, 10 months, and 11 days when he was pitching for the Cincinnati Reds, taking on the eventual World Series champion in the St. Louis Cardinals. Team was trailing 13-0 in the ninth inning. Manager Bill McKechnie, probably pronounced that wrong, called on to Nuxall. He retired the first batter on a ground out.
Okay.
But was unable to get out of the inning, yielding 5 walks, 2 hits, 1 wild pitch, and 5 runs. They sent him back down to the minor leagues. He would eventually return to the majors back in 1952 when he was finally into his 20s. But at 15 years old, pitched a third of an inning in a Major League Baseball game.
Wow, he really put the minor in minor leagues, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Good Lord.
Now,
15.
I wonder how good he had to be in the minors to warrant being called up at 15. And, like, when do you start playing minor league baseball?
That's an even better question, because it sounds like they might have put him out on a minor league roster at age 10 and was like, hey, we got to fill the roster somehow, and Johnny's kid here's got a pretty mean arm on the wiffle ball field.
It says here the scouts became interested in him when he was 14. So in basically a year, and I don't know how deep the minor league system was at that point in time, you probably didn't have, rookie ball, single A, double A, and triple A, maybe like 1 or 2 levels. So he flew through the minor league ranks, whatever they were at that point in time, to at least be on the roster for the Reds in the middle of the season.
That's astonishing. Which, the most Cincinnati Reds thing on the planet is to have a gimmick where you pitch a 15-year-old only for him to get absolutely shelled once he gets out there. And the worst part might be, now that I think about it, is he got the first out, and you're probably thinking, okay, I got this.
All right,
the first one out of the way. We're just playing baseball, baby. And then 5 walks, a wild pitch, and 2 hits later, you get completely humbled in front of God and all creation.
But you know what? I don't know if he was still in school at this point in time or if he dropped out. Probably, I guess so. But if you went to school after that, be like, hey, I saw how bad you were on the mound. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you play professional baseball or did I?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I did. Yeah, thanks. And again, he did return to the Reds back in 1952, played through the 66 season, 2 stints with the Reds, by the way.
Interesting.
Played with the A's in 61, the Angels in 62, and the final 4 years of his career with the Reds. 2-time All-Star, by the way, 55 and 56, and made it in the Reds Hall of Fame.
It turned out well, and that one outing at age 15 didn't completely ruin him.
But, this thing is, I don't expect you to be that good at 15.
No.
Yes, please go back to the minors for the next 8 years and continue to develop. We'll call you back up at 23.
Or high school for the next 2.
Yes, please.
How about that? How about you get to pitch against kids your own age? I think that might help you a little bit in your development.
Perfectly reasonable. What's the most you would pay for a piece of sports memorabilia? Or most you have paid, I guess.
I guess the most I have paid. I paid about $175 for a jersey once.
Okay. 2005, Babe Ruth's 1919 contract that moved him from Boston to the Yankees sold at auction for $996,000.
Woo!
The physical contract itself.
Almost $1 million for that. Yeah, that's wow.
I would assume that's in a museum somewhere. Because, if you're just an average person, an average sports fan, Yankees fan maybe, it's cool to have, but is it worth nearly $1 million if you just have it lying around somewhere or in a plaque or something like that?
Now, if I was worth $1 billion, then yeah.
Just to say you have it?
Just say that I have it. I'd have it framed in a man cave or something like that.
That way, put it in a position where people ask about it. Hey, what's that? Oh, it's just Babe Ruth's contract that sent him to the Yankees back in 1919.
And
it's a conversation point.
That is a fantastic conversation point. Like, this piece of paper started a curse that the Red Sox had to endure until the 2004 team
specifically
lifted those spirits.
Specifically put it out when your friends that are Red Sox fans come over.
Yes.
Like, hey, I have it. I have the thing.
Oh, it'd be even better if they still hadn't won a title by that point.
Yeah.
And then they're going to request that you burn it.
Well, that would have been it would have been purchased at auction the year after they finally broke the curse.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it would have been worth more if the curse hadn't been broken yet.
Absolutely, because that thing is the curse holder. That thing is the possessed item. If you ever watched like a scary movie, there's always usually like a possessed item.
Sure.
That piece of paper was a possessed item for almost 100 years.
Comes to life and haunts your friends while they sleep or something like that.
They see it walking around the hall at night whenever everybody's asleep. It becomes sentient.
So that back in 2005. Okay, 2007. Jeff Gordon wins Pocono 500, rain-shortened event. He was my favorite driver as a kid. I remember this specifically because of what I was doing that day. So this was just for my birthday. We went to Helen, Georgia that day to go tubing on the river. I don't know if you've ever been there before.
No, not there. I've not been to Helen, Georgia for tubing on the river, but I do love tubing on the river.
Great place for tubing on the river. I don't know why, as a kid, I was somebody that likes to wear underwear under my bathing suit.
Okay.
But I did for whatever reason. And I remember specifically, I did not bring a change of underwear after we got done tubing. And it was like a 2-ish hour ride back to my parents' house. So while listening to this event on the radio, I'm sitting there in wet underwear on the way home.
Terrible feeling. But there's a trade-off. And I guarantee you, if you went back in time and told yourself, hey, you can either forget to bring a change of underwear and have to sit soggy bottomed all the way back home and Jeff Gordon win, or you can ride back home in comfort and Jeff Gordon finish 30th.
Yeah.
I think you're making that trade-off.
I probably would have taken it. But it's kind of one of those things like I remember that specifically because of not bringing a change of underwear that day.
Like, buddy, I think I would do that for a Cincinnati Reds win in July. I think I would.
Fair enough. Yeah, but pro tip out there, always bring a change.
Always.
You never, and like
or even a spare. You never know.
You never know
what happens. You never know what happens.
And like, I don't know, I guess I was in charge of packing my bag for that day because I feel like if my mom did it, she would have like actually remembered to pack multiple pairs, but I didn't, and that's on me.
Learn a lesson the hard way.
When you're turning 11, that responsibility falls on you at that point.
It does. It does. I think it does. But speaking of responsibilities at a young age, we did get I got a text from my personal text line, which is not sponsored by Firehouse Subs, but it can be, from Jay Phillips saying, he mentioned the war was going on, so there's not as much depth.
Ooh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
That would make a lot of sense. So, hey, you're a good player. You want to come play professional baseball?
But
sure.
But surely there were more than just 15-year-olds that could have been available. They could have been available, right? There could have been somebody who was not enlisted in military service.
A league of your own. Women's baseball was a thing at that point in time. There's no crying in baseball. We all know the line. Imagine you're, I don't know, practicing at your high school field and somebody walks by and says, hey, I'm the manager of the Reds. You want to come play pro baseball?
Could you?
Sure.
Yeah. How much are you going to pay me? Absolutely nothing. You get to wear the uniform.
You'll get 25 cents a game, which that's $1 million at that point in time.
Yeah. For a 15-year-old, you're like, yeah, okay.
Hey, Mom, Dad, some guy came by and said, I'm going to go play for the Reds tomorrow. So that's happening. Okay, honey, that's nice.
Which I think, like in 1932, $25 was like the equivalent of $450, something like that.
Yeah, sounds about right.
At least it was in 1932. I watched Sinners last night, and there's a lot of mentioning of money there. So you bet I already had the inflation calculator out.
How is it, by the way?
Fantastic.
Is it good?
Oh, I love it.
I've heard a lot of things about it.
Yeah, gripping. Fantastic movie. Highly recommend. You get a chance to watch it.
All right, I have to check that out.
But make sure you have the inflation calculator so you can understand exactly how much money these guys were getting offered to do.
I will definitely have to do that. We'll come back, wrap up the show, hit our Firehouse Subs text of the hour at 803-404-6100 on the halftime show here in the game. Welcome back in halftime show. Tyler, Elijah, Captain Dave wrapping up today's show. I hope Terry Ford will be back tomorrow. We'll see.
Game time decision.
It sounds like he knows what the problem is, getting it repaired, and hopefully he can actually make it safely down from Baltimore this time without his car catching on fire.
Yeah, not ideal. Yeah, I'm not a car expert by any means. I'll never be able to diagnose an issue or anything like that by myself. But I do know cars are at their best when they're not on fire.
Yes, when you don't have any lights on the dash.
Yes.
When your car is running at a nice, safe temperature, doing good.
That's right.
Doing good.
As long as your dashboard doesn't look like a Christmas tree, you're doing pretty good.
You don't have to be an expert to know that. Fire Step 6 to the hour, 803-404-6100. Jeff asks, just curious, how much did Babe sign for in that contract that sent him to the Yankees? I'm so glad you asked. Prior to the 1919 season, he signed a 3-year deal that would pay him $10,000 annually. Let's do the CPI calculation.
Yes.
$10,000 back in 1919 equates out to $194,000 today.
Oh, wow.
So
even with inflation, yeah.
Over 3 years.
Good deal.
Over 3 years, he would make less than $600,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot more money in Major League Baseball now than there was then.
Yeah, so that is...
There are college baseball coaches at group of 5 levels that are making more money than Babe Ruth would have made.
That's crazy.
Inflation adjusted as well.
I don't know if I've told you this before, but my buddy's grandfather is Daryl Cheney, who was part of the Big Red Machine back in the 70s. And I got a chance to meet him when we were doing radio back in college. And, he was telling us, back then, we didn't have $1 million contract. He was a mail carrier in the offseason. So
wow.
He went and won the World Series and went and carried mail for the next 3 to 4 months after that before spring training.
That's wild. But that makes a ton of sense. They weren't making hand over fist money. The TV contracts weren't anywhere near as lucrative, as they are now.
Just think about this. Imagine you're living in Atlanta, per se, and I don't know, you're out and about and you see somebody, landscaping, and it's Austin Riley. Hey man, what you doing? Oh, I'm just trying to make some money until the next baseball season rolls around. That's the equivalent.
Hey, great season. You can hit 40 home runs again? All right, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, yeah.
Oh, you missed a spot, by the way. You gonna weed that grass by the mailbox over there? Thanks. Times have changed.
Serving table. Say having Max Fried be a server for you.
Yeah, exactly. Aren't you Max Fried? Yes, I am.
Yes,
Hopefully you'll tip me well because I need it.
I won't. I remember how some of your playoff outings have gone. So
I don't know about that. You gonna pitch better next time? If you tip me well, maybe I will.
Maybe I will. Yeah, I can certainly be bought to pitch better.
Yeah, it is crazy to look back, and Terry and I, we've looked back at some of the old NFL drafts, and there were guys that would get picked first overall and be like, nah, I'm going to go work in the steel mill. That's more lucrative. My dad says I need to quit playing games and get a real job. Imagine that now. Could you imagine the number 1 overall pick nah, I'm going to go work in the factory.
I'm going to join the workforce.
Join the workforce. The family business on the farm.
Signed with
or something
LinkedIn.
like that. Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. But back then, there weren't exactly television deals back then.
Radio deals.
They really depended on ticket sales and how many Cracker Jack boxes they sold. That's going to determine how much they had to pay your salary.
That reminds me, you know what came across my Twitter timeline the other day? It was somebody with a screen grab of from Wikipedia's page of the now infamous 10-cent beer night.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Where it's I think they adjusted it for inflation or whatever, and still it's only $3.50 for a beer at a ball game, which would be a dream come true.
You can still go to dollar beer nights at a lot of games. I think was it Fireflies? Is it $2 beers at Fireflies?
It might be.
Yeah, something cheap like that. So
I haven't been to one of those yet. I haven't been to one of the alcohol promoted nights.
I think the outing we went to last year was a $2 beer night or something when we did the company one. I think.
I was too busy drinking the fancy beers instead.
That's true. Anyways, thanks for hopping in once again. Again, hopefully Terry's back tomorrow and you don't have to do this again.
Hey, there's a good chance. I'll be back in here with you tomorrow, 2 to 3 as well.
What's
coming? The Elijah Power Hour.
What's coming up on the post-game show?
Our man John Whittle going to join us at 3:30. We have a fun start bench drop that may or may not involve a couple of the greatest wins at Clemson in Carolina history.
That's coming up next on the post-game show. This has been the halftime show on your Tuesday on the Game.